Okay, welcome everyone. It is Wednesday, April 13th. This is a regularly scheduled select board meeting. My name is Roger Arnold. I'm joined by Mary Layton, Vice Chair, Claudette Brochu, Marcia Calloway, Rob Gear, and we also have Rod Francis, our town manager, with us. This is a remote only meeting as allowed by the provisions of Act 78. That means that there's no designated meeting location where the public may attend. Votes that are not unanimous may be roll called. We welcome comments for all items on the agenda. Board member discussion will be specifically prioritized. Please try to phrase your comments as comments rather than questions. And please direct all comments to me as chair, and I will direct another person for follow-up if that is necessary. Okay, so the first item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. We have a request for an addition. It is the approval of expenditures for really sort of a retrofitting of our computers, really, and there is supporting information provided to us. We've been given a heads up in the past about this that was forthcoming, so it seems appropriate to add it to the agenda if board members would like. The only thing I will, the invoice became available sort of the day after our agenda setting, so it seems, so it's our choice if we wanted to wait, but it seems, anyway, that's the context. So that is a suggestion for a change of the agenda. So I'll leave it to y'all to give me a motion. Go ahead, Mary.
I move to approve the agenda as amended.
That's great. Is there a second? Okay, made by Mary, seconded by Rob. Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, great. So we have the approval of our agenda. The next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. And so
isn't it public comment though?
Oh, it's public comments. Thank you for that.
Selectboard comment, yeah.
Okay. I'm rushing because I really want to get to our appointments because we have so many faces with us. But nonetheless, it is public comment for items that are not on the agenda. Or are there any members of the public who would like to make a comment for an item not on the agenda? You can use your Zoom hand on the bottom of the screen, raise your hand, and *9 if you're on the phone. Okay, I see Mary, perhaps with a select board comment.
Yeah, I just think that thinking about how the world has been, we're coming out of COVID, we've got inflation, we've got very low unemployment rate. There's a lot going on, and I'm just hoping that people can feel okay and try to get along and try to pull together just in general. So that's it.
Yeah, thanks. That's a worthwhile public service announcement. Thank you, Mary. Marcia, I see your hand.
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to let the folks know, some people had asked me about the statutes for planning commissions and directors of public of zoning and that sort of thing. And so I have written a memo which went to the board, and I suggested that it be looked at by legal counsel, and that's happening. So I wanted people to know that.
Yes, it's in their hands. Great. Go ahead, Claudette.
Just as an update for committee appointments, last night's planning commission, I believe they received resignation of Leah Romano. So I believe now that there would be 4 seats open. But
That's
I don't
right.
know if we can adjust tonight to the 4 seats, or do we need to wait?
I think we can discuss a little bit when we get to that agenda item. But thank you. I received word officially from Leah. I acknowledged her email and thanked her on behalf of the board and was going to, of course, announce it to all of you. So, but let's discuss how we want to handle that when we get to appointments. But thank you, Claudette.
Okay.
Okay. All right, so maybe we can move on to the consent agenda. Is that right? I got that right? Great.
Yes.
All right, so I would love to take a motion for the consent agenda. Go ahead, Mary.
I move to approve the consent agenda.
Okay, is there a second? Okay, made by Mary, seconded by Marcia. Okay, any discussion about correspondence, the warrant, or the meeting minutes? Go ahead, Mary.
Only that I like the correspondence that says it would be great if we grew sunflowers all over Vermont in support of Ukraine, and I plan to do so. My mother always has them, always have them in her garden, but I think by the roadway would be really good. So.
Yeah, no, I thought that was interesting. Thank you for acknowledging it. I would like to, I feel, I would just like to acknowledge John Carroll wrote to the board, reminding us, offering some tips, to say the least, about, how to run effective meetings that allow us to do our deliberative work, but also have public participation. I'm very mindful of I felt like advice, and I'm very mindful of it personally, and I'm thankful for it. So thank you, John Carroll. Anything else? Okay. And then, all in favor, I'll call the question of approving the consent agenda. Please raise your hand. Okay, excellent. Okay, now for, so we have our appointments, and the motion sheet sort of sets out a procedure for doing this, right? We'll have, it says who is applying and how many seats there are, right? And it takes the names in one single motion. So what I would like to do is I would like to hear from the folks who are named in that motion first, and then after we hear from them, perhaps we could make a motion. It would be great, because I'm also going to be bringing people onto the screen. Mary, I'm sprinting this on you. If you can just announce the name to me, the motion, so I can go find them and bring them over to our screen so we can see them. But let's start actually with Linda Cook and
Right.
the Solid Waste Committee, and then if you can go down the list and give me the names,
Sure.
that'll be really helpful.
Okay.
Okay.
Start with Linda Cook.
So we'll do the Solid Waste Committee, and we have an applicant in Linda Cook. And so the question that I'll ask, just stepping back 1 second, I should say, we ask folks to appear for these appointments. And I know it's a busy time with school vacation week, and so we're really appreciative of people's attendance. We do this so we have a chance to meet some of you who, if we don't already know, to discuss your application, to address any questions, and to also consider sort of the full makeup of the team, right, of that given public body. And so it's both a get to know you, and to think about all the skills that we're bringing together. Okay, but now that being said, now I'll turn to Linda Cook and the Solid Waste Committee. So Linda, I'll ask, can you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your interest in joining this committee?
Hi, I'm Linda Cook. I've applied for the Solid Waste Committee. I've been volunteering up there, doing various projects like opening up the the book shed with about 8 to 10 other people, trying to clean it up, get it reorganized and functioning again. And I think that was our first really working time up there doing to help. And then I've just been there at different times for an hour or so here and there, trying to meet the new people in the community and do a little explaining of the operations that happen up there. So they've got a little bit of an idea, and trying to point out the people that work there and who to ask your questions of, that they will be able to help you. And just trying to help people with a transition moving into our town and what's available to them. I also was a member of the select board and reviewed the Casella contract and set the ticket fees and also permit sticker fees due to revenue versus expenditures and what we needed to cover our costs. So I've been a part of it for quite some time in various aspects. And do you have any questions for me?
I think that's great. That that was perfect. You're modeled what we'd love to hear a little bit for everyone who's coming next. And do board members have any questions? Go ahead, Mary.
I just have a comment. I appreciate what Linda is saying about helping people who are new to town to know what to do at the transfer station, because I think it can be a bit bewildering, especially if they come from an area where recycling is not done. And it kind of builds on something that also came out of the Child Care Committee, that in other areas, we could find ways to be welcoming to new residents.
Yes. Thank you, Mary. Rob, did I see your hand? You're on mute. Okay, there we go.
Still muted?
Still on mute. Still on mute.
Spacebar didn't work. So
Okay.
just wanted to ask Linda, how many years has she been a user of the recycling transfer area? Because I imagine she started back when it was a dump.
That's correct, Rob. It was a dump at that point, and then it started transitioning to a transfer station where people sorted their trash up there down little holes at a table and moving along to what we have today.
Thank you.
I'm
Okay.
not sure if when I was a child, I went up there very often. That was not a place my parents wanted me to run around.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, broken glass. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. I would love to take a motion. We got some bonus transfer station nostalgia, which is great too. Is there a motion? Go ahead, Mary.
I move to appoint Linda Cook to the Solid Waste Committee for a term to be determined.
That's right.
Okay.
By the committee
By the
themselves.
committee, I think.
Mhm.
Okay.
Okay. Is there a second?
Goes
Okay,
Rob, right?
I saw Rob's hand. Okay, so it's made by Mary, seconded by Rob. Any discussion, further discussion? Go ahead, Marcia.
Yeah, that's an odd thing, isn't it, to have the term determined by the committee itself? Why isn't the board doing it?
I think it says to be determined. We can come back and revisit it. Part of getting their quorum is also students. Like the students have voting rights who also or voting privileges because they're committee members. But I think the nature of the membership makeup invites further discussion on terms. Does that make sense? Which is what we've done. We have made these appointments.
Yeah, I guess I'm just getting concerned when we had one appointment who was a student for the Conservation Commission, I think, and the student didn't live in Norwich. And I think, to some extent, I think with a student, I'm a little bit less concerned, except that if they have voting rights, I think that gives voting rights to people who don't live in the town. So I think that the board should be cognizant of making sure that committees are seeking board membership, and that if they are going to allow students, I can't imagine a situation where we would want to encourage or allow a person from another town to serve on a committee in our town. But students are sort of special, but I don't know that an out-of-town student should have voting rights. And so to the extent that there's an idea that perhaps the Solid Waste Committee has the prerogative to determine who on their committee can vote, I would object to that.
So I'll just say that the committee has a charge. The committee makes clear the number and the terms. And then the motion on the table is, to be determined. So in the interest of time, particularly because we have other folks with us this evening, we can make it a future agenda item to discuss that point, because we also want to talk about committees more broadly. But the motion itself says to be determined. It doesn't necessarily explicitly state by the committee. And as I alluded to, the membership of the committee is such that it needs to be determined. So that's my explanation. I don't know if that helps.
Well, I guess I'd feel better if we could have a term for Linda.
Okay. Is there a friendly amendment you would like to make to the motion?
If I can know the history, are people generally appointed for a 2-year term, a 3-year term? Is it, yeah?
I'm going to turn to Claudette.
So when this committee first started, they had a difficult time getting enough applicants to have a quorum. There is currently a 3-year, and I think it's either Jack or Andy Shearer. A 2-year, which is either Jack or Andy. Alex Nordgren Thorngren, apologies for mispronouncing his name, was a 1-year, and he resigned. And at that time, or right before then, the 2 students came on, one who was a town resident and another who is a Hanover student. And they were, I believe, both for 1 year. So in effect, we could give Linda the 1 year, a 1-year term.
Let's do that. Can we make that friendly amendment?
Yes, that friendly amendment is acceptable to me.
Okay. So
Rob, though?
and
Second, yeah.
Okay, lovely. So then with that, I'm happy to call the question with the friendly amendment.
Okay.
All in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much, Claudette, for that lift. Yeah, and thank you to Linda.
So now we're going to Conservation Commission, Alex Gottlieb and Craig Lane.
Okay, thank you, Mary. I saw Craig Lane, here he is. So folks can turn on their cameras when we announce their names. I can bring them over. I can add a spotlight. So here's Craig, which is great. And then I'm not seeing Mr. Gottlieb.
Alex is
Here he is.
there.
Here he is. Okay.
Linda, could you mute, please?
I'm going to mute Linda now. Great. Okay. So welcome to Craig and Alex. These are two applicants for two open positions. Craig, why don't we begin with you? Can you introduce yourself and tell us why you're interested in continuing on the Conservation Commission?
Yeah, hi, I'm Craig Lane, Tigertown Road. I've been on the commission several iterations and lately started several projects that I feel I should continue to help work on.
That's great. Thanks, Craig. Do any folks have any questions for Craig? Obviously, we know his work in many ways. Go ahead, Claudette.
Craig, could you expand on the projects that you want to continue to work on?
Well, primarily the Woody Adams Conservation Forest. So it's town parcels now and conserved, but there's a lot of posting to do and trail work and other conservation work to do.
Okay. Thanks. Any other questions for Craig? Go ahead, Marcia.
Yeah, question, more of a comment. I mean,
Sure.
over the time I've been on the board, I've been concerned about longevity on boards and turnover. Craig is a good example of a person that's been extremely valuable. And I think we have to be mindful of that sort of value and the kind of projects that you're doing. It doesn't mean that I don't think that we should have new blood turning over, but I'm always torn because certainly there are times when people are doing a lot of things and have a background that really is suitable to help the town. So I hope you are doing a lot for forests, because deforestation is going to impair our work on climate change, and we need to keep that in mind.
Okay, thank you, Marcia. Any other comments or questions with Craig? Otherwise, I'm happy to hear from Alex. Okay. So the other applicant for the other open position is Alex Gottlieb. Same question. Can you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your interest in serving on the Conservation Commission? I believe this is would be your first term, right?
Yeah, that's correct. So yeah, my name's sorry, my name is Alex Gottlieb. I live out in West Norwich on Beaver Meadow Road, just up the road from Craig. I'm a PhD student at Dartmouth, and my research interests focus on kind of studying the impacts of climate change on ecosystems. So sort of broadly thinking about sort of how the world is changing around us, kind of as a result of anthropogenic activities, and what that means for kind of the plant and animal assemblages around us. It's sort of a big, that is my professional life in my training as a scientist. And then also, you know, personally, that's really kind of what I spend a lot of my time thinking about and doing. I'm really very passionate about kind of science outreach and science communication. You know, since I moved out here, or about a couple 100 feet up the road from a really active amphibian crossing on nights a lot like tonight, I'll probably be out there. So, you know, I spend my time out there and kind of bringing in neighbors, especially a lot of neighbors with young kids. We love going out with our flashlights and reflective gear and kind of, you know, introducing them to spotted salamanders and all of the various species of frogs, and kind of teaching about, you know, sort of that annual migration cycle that happens every year. And I've done a lot of that in my past too, working with a lot of kind of preschool aged kids, introducing them to, you know, sort of some basic environmental science. So, you know, I've sort of, since we moved out here in 2019, I feel like I've been kind of engaging with a lot of that in our little community out here in West Norwich. And I'm just really excited about the idea of kind of engaging with the broader Norwich community a little more and bringing some of my kind of experience and expertise to that. And also sort of taking a lot of my training as a scientist and sort of helping, you know, make sure that, you know, in interacting with kind of town bodies writ large, and making sure that we're making kind of, you know, good scientifically informed, data-driven decisions, you know, based on how rapidly the world is changing around us. So I guess I'll leave it at that.
Yes. Wow. Snaps for that. Thank you so much, Alex. That was really great. And yeah, you've hit on so much of the work of the conservation, I think, because there's, you know, both forestry management, right, and land management, so much as there's a, you know, a love of a programmatic output, right, and like connecting with the community and doing some education. And so that's really wonderful. Any questions or comments for Alex? Go ahead, Marcia.
I'm really delighted to have a person who hasn't had any service yet for town who's interested in doing this, and especially somebody who's working in that field, that particular PhD. And I really hope that there's more outreach among the committees, because there's a tension between certain aspects of global climate change and how we deal with that. And that even happens among the committees that we have and the work that we do in town. So I think the more science and information that everybody is privy to is going to be helpful. So I'm hoping that your commission is going to be very active, and that you're going to be using what you know to help educate more people here. And you're welcome to my backyard, which is a cacophony. of little peepers.
Yeah, we seem to be a couple weeks behind a lot of the rest of town out here. So they just started peeping yesterday.
Not,
So
not
we're not
here.
quite at cacophony level, but I'm hoping in the next couple nights.
I've had them for the week.
All right.
Well, let me
Um,
tell you, up here, nothing's happening.
We have different microclimates.
Yeah, so I'm up in the corner of Stratford, Thetford, Norwich at about 1,500 feet, and there's nothing happening here yet,
The bottom of the book.
other than some birds.
I'm
Bottom of the
sorry,
watershed.
gonna rein in the
I digress.
peepers. and the motion is written as a suite, and so I leave it to folks to make that motion or to create
Yeah,
another one. Go
I'll
ahead,
do it.
Mary.
Okay, I move to appoint Alex Gottlieb and Craig Lane to the Conservation Commission for terms to expire on March 31st, 2026.
Okay, is there a second?
Second,
Okay, made by Mary, second by Claudette. Rob, do you have any peeper stories, or can I call the question?
No, I squeal a little bit, but other than that, no.
Okay, that's awesome. All right. Okay, all in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, thank you. All right. Thank you, Alex and Craig, for being here and for your service.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Next is EC Fiber Governing Board and alternate, seat plus alternate, Irv Tomai and Rob Gear.
Okay, great. Irv, welcome. This is usually a time where we hear a little bit of an EC Fiber update, which is exciting, but could possibly be contained to 3 minutes or so. So we would love to hear that. So I would love to hear that and about the work that you've been doing for that board, because this is a reappointment as well. And you're on mute.
Yes, thank you. At the 700-foot elevation here on New Boston Road, I think I heard one faint peeper last night, but they haven't warmed up yet. I've been a Norwich resident since 1975. In 2008, the Select Board appointed me to represent Norwich on the governing board of EC Fiber. And EC Fiber has changed its form 6 years ago with the passage of enabling legislation. We transformed into a municipal telecommunications district. And that is a new creation in Vermont law, but as a district, it is itself a municipality. So this is not really a town committee. There are, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. My something popped up on my screen that seemed to think I needed to select a microphone, so I just will ignore it. There are 23 original member towns in the district, and we added another 6 almost 2 years ago now. And each town appoints a delegate and 1 or 2 alternates. At a meeting of the governing board, every town that has somebody present gets 1 vote, regardless of population. And our membership ranges from tiny towns like Hancock and Rochester up to Hartford is our largest member town. We are unusual in a couple of ways, and one of them is that we're not supported from residential taxes of any kind. So that puts us in an odd situation, a good one. And at this point, across our 23 member towns, we have 7,100 plus people connected to full strength broadband. Broadband better than you can get in the suburbs of some major cities. But we have a lot more to do. And here in Norwich, we have a peculiar situation. There are folks that have been wanting to be connected for quite a long time, and their neighbors are already connected. And people ask why. Well, when we first started building several years ago, we were doing it on a shoestring. And some compromises were made, such as not providing enough capacity for the growth that we've seen. And it takes time to add that capacity. that's been going on. We are hopeful that this month or next, we'll at last be able to connect everybody in Norwich, regardless. So I wanted to give you that update. I also want to point out that our governing board has a mixture of people who served for a long time and people who are new. And there's value in institutional memory. There's value in having some people who remember some of the mistakes we made way back. And now that there's a lot of federal money coming through, are able to speak up and say, let's not make that mistake again with a lot more money. And that is one of the roles that I feel I play as a member of the governing board, of its executive committee, and its government relations officer. I have some responsibility for testifying to legislative committees and to the Vermont Community Broadband Board, which was created by last year's legislation. And my testimony helped avoid some mistakes in that legislation too. And which is responsible for distributing construction grants based on that federal money to complete not only EC Fiber's territory, but all across the state, where several more communication union districts have been formed to try to create, to provide rural access everywhere of full strength. I hope I was within 3 minutes, and I'll pause for questions.
Not quite, but we've benefited nonetheless from the more minutes. So thank you so much, Irv.
Thank you.
Do any folks have questions for about the EC Fiber governing board, the structure? This is sort of our yearly update as much as it's an appointment. Go ahead, Marcia.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, in terms of the federal monies that are coming through for the municipality, is there a difference in the amount of monies per town, or is it all the same because you have one vote per town? Or is there some accommodation because some towns are more populated than others and the need is maybe different town to town?
I'm not sure I understand the question. The federal money is directed toward building new infrastructure. We actually aren't able to apply that money to build more here in Norwich or Woodstock or even Hartford, but we will be able to build out in the new member towns. And ultimately that will help us to reduce our cost per customer and reduce rates across the whole territory. We do not separate individual towns. That's the whole point of being a unified district.
Okay, I think that was helpful. And I think that addressed the majority.
Yeah. I just wanted to know if Norwich is getting a different amount of money for infrastructure than other places, but you answered.
Well, the amount of money, the infrastructure money is a different program. And Norwich does get some infrastructure money based on its population. But we have not asked you to put some of that money toward EC Fiber because we're well aware that the town has several other pressing infrastructure needs. The only area in which we might think of asking you to think about it would be conduit to connect businesses and mobile homes to our network. But we really aren't about to ask you for that. It's a possibility if you think we ought to think about it, talk to you about it, we will happily propose it, but it's not on our priority wish list at this time.
And thank you, Marcia and Irv, you've sort of previewed the next agenda item in many ways. So this is also a suite, right? Rob Gear is an alternate, right? So Rob, can you just quickly speak about how your role is as an alternate, what that looks like Can you tell us a little bit about what an alternate position does and how it works with Irv?
Yeah, essentially my role as an alternate is to step in if Irv gets hit by a bus. And so what I do in order to feel confident in that role is I've attended all the meetings. I've kept abreast of all the issues that face the governing board, that face EC Fiber, and try and keep in touch with, keep aware of what Irv's positions have been, which are usually quite well thought out. The one thing in relationship to the last discussion, EC Fiber gets grants from the state, from the federal government as an entity in its whole existence. So it's not related to individual towns. The infrastructure money he was talking about is money that comes directly to Norwich, but which could be used on internet access.
Right. All right. So,
priorities. Anyways, that's it.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Rob, for that. And I see Irv has his hand up, but I want to actually take a motion for this suite, and then maybe in discussion.
I just wanted to recognize our other alternate, Joshua Bohar, who is present, but is not applied for reappointment. And you might want to give him a moment to explain why he didn't.
Okay. So let's do that. Thank you so much, Irv. Hi, Joshua, how are you? And I just recently was looking at your the EC Fiber minutes for reasons I don't know. And I saw that all of you were in attendance always, and that's pretty amazing. So, and thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. Yeah, I was going to say I very much enjoyed the position and representing the town of Norwich as an alternate. And my position has changed for work, which kind of creates a conflict of interest. So I will not be reapplying this year. But I did want to, I guess I wanted to elaborate on kind of the idea of term limits on it, because I feel there's a level of specialty in this type of position for Norwich to allow members like Irv and they have been on it for a while. They kind of have a level of ability and understanding that is kind of difficult to jump into. I work in the industry, and there's a tremendous amount I learned in this position over the last year. So again, thankful for it. Unfortunately, I just cannot reapply due to a conflict of interest with my current employer.
Yeah, yes, but nonetheless, thank you so much for your service, and thank you, Irv, for pointing out that Joshua was here with us. Marcia, quick question. We really do sort of need to work our way through these appointments.
Just a commendation, Joshua. Thank you for recognizing a conflict of interest and putting it out there. Thank you very much, and thank you for your service.
Thank you.
Okay, yes. Mary, are you ready for that motion?
Yes, I am. Let's see. I move to appoint Irv Tomine as representative and Robert Gear as alternate representative to the EC Fiber Governing Board for terms to expire on April 30th, 2023.
Okay, is there a second? Okay, made by Mary, seconded by Claudette. I'm going to call the question. All in favor, please raise your hand.
I have to recuse myself, I think.
Okay, so we will say 401 and abstention. Okay. With thanks to our EC Fiber folks.
Thank you.
Okay.
Next appointment is for Developmental Review Board, Don McCabe.
Okay. Welcome, Don. Tell us a little bit about your reapplication to the DRB and introduce yourself to us.
Okay, Don. Yeah, hi, Don McCabe, Meeting House Road. I've been on the Development Review Board since about the last ice age, and I really enjoyed serving under changing board over time. I've been, along with my family, residents for 36 years. And development has changed a great deal, as you know, and the regulations have become more complex. But Arlene Rotman as chair, and of course Rod as the zoning administrator, have done a masterful job of bringing the issues to us. We discuss them, we form a consensus, and very often it's a very clear consensus on how to rule. And so I enjoy the work and I hope to do more of it.
That's great. Thanks so much, John. Any questions? I would love to take a motion then.
Okay, I move to appoint Don McCabe to the Development Review Board for a term to expire on April 30th, 2025.
Okay, that's lovely. Seconded by Rob. So made by Mary, seconded by Rob. Any discussion? Just to say, we're really thankful for your service and your continued work on the DRB.
Thank you all.
All right, all in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, great. Thanks, Don. What's next, Mary?
Okay, the next is the Energy Committee, 2 seats, Charles Lindner and Brad Weibel.
Okay, I see them here. And so, great. So this is two appointments for 2 seats. Charlie Lindner is a reappointment, and we have a new appointment in Brad. So why don't we begin with Brad? Same question. Introduce yourself and tell us about your interest in the position. How's that?
Yeah, great. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. Thank you, everybody, for the opportunity. My name is Brad Weibel. I live out toward Union Village Dam on Kirwan Hill Road. I'm new to town within the past year, but looking for an opportunity to meet people and to help the community. And so my neighbor, Linda Gray, who knows a thing or two about this, I talked to her a lot about energy and opportunities in the community, and she encouraged me to apply. So as a homeowner and just a citizen, informed citizen, as we heard earlier, climate change is happening, and energy efficiency and renewable energy is one of the key things that we can do to address that. So as just a citizen, as a parent, as a grandparent, excuse me, not as a grandparent, that's right. I'm inclined to do whatever I can to help these things. And then in my professional life, I spend a lot of time thinking about science, technology, and public policy, and a lot of that gets into the climate and energy space. And so I'm not shy about geeking out about these kinds of issues in a technical and policy wonky kind of way. And so anything I can do to sort of roll up my sleeves and help translate that wonkiness into on the ground change in the community, I'm really eager to try to do. So I'll stop rambling. Thanks.
No, that was awesome. Thank you so much, Brad. Any folks have any questions for our Brad, this is a new appointment?
Yeah.
Marcia has a question.
Just a comment, I'm really pleased when people move to town and are interested in joining things. So welcome and good luck. Please keep the science in front of us all, because I'm really worried about conflicts.
Yeah, you and me both. Thanks.
Yes. So then, thanks. Brad will now turn to Charlie Linder as a reappointment. Charlie, same question. Tell us a little bit about your work, what you look to continue to do, and anything about yourself.
Sure. I live on Hawk Pine Road. I've been on the committee for 3 years. Volunteered with it for a year before that to get to know what the work was. And I kind of do whatever is needed on different basis. And we used to be able to do a lot of face-to-face conversations with people in the community at the transfer station and at Dan and Witt's and various kinds of places. Be nice to get back to that. But so I've been doing a lot on the listserv. Then I've got a project of encouraging people to have a home action plan to look at all the different kinds of infrastructure in our homes that we find that we need to replace, and to plan ahead and to learn about new technologies rather than be at the point of, I need a new boiler, but I don't know that much about heat pumps, so I think I'll keep burning fossil fuel. So that's the latest project I've been working on, and there've been weekly posts that you may be getting tired of, you know, about different kinds of things from electric vehicles to electric lawnmowers. So,
Yeah.
and we have a lot of people who've been, the thing that's most satisfying are the conversations with people who respond and say, how do I learn more about this? We have a neighborhood network and I'm part of that. And it's always satisfying to talk to people about what they're trying to do and what's realistic and what the next steps can be that you can do, whether it's a clothesline instead of your dryer. So, and I have 2 grandchildren who you may hear in the background. I'm at my daughter's house, and I'm not happy about what lies ahead for them. And that's why I do this work.
Great. Okay, thanks so much, Charlie. This is, yes, another committee that is really prolific in their programmatic output. And thank you for being a part of that. And welcome, Brad. Any other, I would love to take, how about we take a motion and then maybe we can further the discussion if we need to.
Okay, I move to appoint Charles Lindner and Brad Weibel to the Energy Committee for terms to expire on March 31st, 2025.
Okay, is there a second? Okay, made by Mary, seconded by Rob. Any other discussions or comments for these folks? Right. With thanks to your service, I'll call the question. All in favor, please raise your hand. All right, lovely. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here.
Okay, the next is the Historic Preservation Commission.
Okay.
Philip Say.
Okay, here. Okay. Hi, Philip, welcome. We're asking folks to introduce themselves and just tell us about their interest in serving on, in this case, the Historic Preservation Commission.
Sure. Well, I'm Phil Zay. We live at 65 Maple Hill Road. I've been on the Historic Preservation Commission for 1 term. I'm the vice chair, following along after Nancy Osgood. And we've had several projects in the works, most recently a barn survey of important structures in town that do a lot to maintain the character of Norwich, but also to reinforce tourism and education. There was a program that was well received a week or so ago that maybe some of you saw. As for myself, I've been a professional in historic preservation since the 1970s, working in museums and other nonprofits in New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Virginia. And I retired about a year ago. And so now there's what maybe I should have been doing more of all along, and that is turning to my roots here in Norwich and contributing what I can to make Norwich a better, more vital community. So there I am.
That's great. Thanks so much. Do folks have any questions for Phil? Go ahead, Marcia.
Bill, I'm just glad that you're back and you're involved, and I can't think of a more qualified person to do this work. We need a lot of work, and I hope that you're extremely active. Thank you.
Appreciate it, Marcia. Thanks.
Yes, folks are nodding and smiling to that. So indeed. All right, so I'll take a motion if that's okay.
Okay, I move to appoint Philip Zay to the Historic Preservation Commission for a term to expire on April 30th, 2025.
Okay, is there a second?
Okay.
Okay, made by Mary, seconded by Marcia. Anything else? All right, with thanks for your interest and your service, I'll call the question. All in favor? Okay, thanks so much, Phil.
Great, appreciate it. Take care, everybody.
Yeah, take care.
Next is the Planning Commission. So
Yeah.
Claudette had the issue of there are now 4 open seats. So perhaps we should talk about that.
Yes, so a couple notes. So yes, so now with Leah Romano's resignation. We have 4 applicants for four seats. And then the only thing I'll say too is Vince Crow, who's an applicant who couldn't be here with us because it's school vacation week, I asked him the same question that I've been asking all evening, and he recorded a video. So I'll be sharing that with us. And so these are the 2 technical things that we just FYI. So I guess what would we like to do in with this? We have 4 willing applicants and we have 4 now open positions. What would we like to do? Claudette and then Marcia.
Do we know when Leah's term was going to expire?
Yes, if I'll take Marcia's question or comment and then I'll go look that up. How's that?
I can speak to that. I can speak to that, Roger. This is
Okay,
Jackie.
sure.
I'm just gonna get
Hi,
my
Jackie.
Hi, good morning or good afternoon, everybody. Good
Yeah.
evening. Let's see, Leo's term was due next April.
Okay.
Yep.
So this would be sort of one more year to finish out the term, and then they would this person would reapply. So that is something to consider. One of these applicants would be an appointment in a seat that has to expire, that will expire in a year. It's not a full term.
So that would be, you call it April 30th, 2023?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Just because it could be set up, one would be that date and the others would be the date that's listed on the motion, which would be April 30th, 2026.
Yes.
Yeah.
So what I would recommend then, assuming, and I don't know if this is the case, assuming we're willing to hear from all 4 applicants for the 4 vacancies, we should consider separate motions, separate motions to make the appointments one by one, right? That's what I would recommend in this case.
Why?
Because otherwise you're taking 3 as a suite and then sort of 1 sort of separate. And I think you could just consider the applicant for one individually for the seat. That's just like one way to think about it.
Okay, well.
It's up to you. It's up to the board. That's a question. But Marcia, you had your hand up, and so I want to get to you.
Thank you. I think that sort of thing happened in Ernie Ciccatelli's first term. He can tell us. But I think that it's more efficient to do the replacement now and make it to just the end of the term of the person that's expiring, and maybe just efficiently do 2 motions, 1 for that particular seat and 1 motion for the other 3 seats.
I agree.
Okay, that's fine. Rob?
Would it make sense to find out if any of the applicants is interested in a 1-year term rather than, because I think everybody was presuming the longer term.
Good point.
Do board members have thoughts on that? I mean, I do think Leah herself came in, right, and completed a term and then was appointed for a full term, and then now is ironically stepping off. So it's not necessary. I think that year appointment term is not necessarily. I think even our current chair was stepped in as a replacing someone else's term. So it's not like it's not like you don't have a future life in the planning commission or any other commission if you're finishing out a term, right? I'll say that. And they're rewriting the zoning, so I think we don't want too much. I think we do want some continuity. I would say that to all of our applicants, that
Yes, that makes sense. I'd like to hear from the applicants.
Okay, so we're fine sort of taking 2 different motions, and I will hear from all of you as to how those names will be decided for those motions. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah.
Okay, so thank you, Mary. So can you announce the name for me? The first name on the list, or the names?
Well, the names are Vince Crow, Ernie Ciccatelli, Mark Aquila, I think I pronounced that correctly, and
Mhm.
Brian Loeb.
Okay, so let's listen to these three folks, and then I have Vince on a recorded video. Okay, so Ernie, why don't you speak to your application and your work on the Planning Commission? This is a reappointment.
Okay, can you hear me? Because my computer, all right, good. It's telling me to unmute myself. I've completed, I think, about 4 years as a planning commission member. Prior to that, I'd been on the DRB since it was founded, since the very first meeting for about 15 years. And now we're working on the land use regulations, renovating them and renewing them. And I think that that's exactly what I wanted to be involved with when I joined the Planning Commission, because after 15 years of wrestling with the regulations that we had on the DRB, I felt that they needed to be a bit clearer, a bit easier to implement, and so on. And those are what I've been sort of keeping my eye on in the drafting of the regulations, which we've already started and we're well underway. And I want to just say that, you know, this for me is also the kind of work, committee work, that I enjoy doing. I wanted to be involved in the drafting of the regulations, and I've gotten my hands way up into my elbows doing that. And it's something I enjoy, the challenge of trying to make, you know, language clear, make the regulations fair and understandable by both the applicants and the town committees that have to implement them to DRB. And I think that I've got a unique combination of skills that make it so that I'm suitable for this particular work. I also happen to go into the what's sometimes referred to as the most prominent environmental law school, and I studied environmental law while I was there, among other things. So I think that you know, I'm well suited for the position, and as I said, I enjoy it. I like the people that I'm working with. I don't know, really, I think it was like the perfect commission for me to be put on. So I'm really happy with it.
Great. Thanks so much, Ernie. We'll hear from other folks next, but thank you so much. Do anyone well, let's take questions after we hear from everyone. How's that sound? Mark, you're gonna have to tell us how you pronounce your last name so we don't keep messing it up. And then, but same question, introduce yourself and speak to your application.
Sure thing. No problem. Thank you guys for taking the time. So my name is Mark Aquila. People will say it many different ways, and that's okay. So Mark Aquila. My wife and I have lived in Norwich for the past 10 years. We have 2 kids at Marion Cross in 1st and 3rd grade. We own our own home. We've also built a home in Norwich, and so we're landlords for the past 5 years. On the zoning side, we live in the rural residential district. So most of our land is in use with a forestry plan. We raise bees, chickens, and pigs at home. We live just a bit past Irv, so the first peeper woke up last night and was peeping away till around 10 p.m. Just keep the peeper update going. Professionally, I've spent about 17 years working at 3 different companies that are each 200 years old. So I know how important it is to try to innovate and get things done while also honoring just the traditions that have happened before and what has come before you. And I think that's really difficult. But I've spent a lot of time working in those environments. So I'm interested in the Planning Commission because I like to contribute to like the wastewater, the zoning, and the affordable housing. Those are 3 things that I care about. And I think those 3 are on the agenda for the next little bit. So happy to answer any questions that you have. I'm also happy to be considered for the 1-year term. I'm trying to get involved. I don't have a strong preference. So if that's easy for you guys, take it away.
I imagine that is helpful. And thanks so much for being here. and your
Thank
interest. And well, probably people may have questions for you. Brian Loeb, hello, welcome.
Hi, thanks, Roger, and thanks everyone else. So my name is Brian Loeb. Like Ernie, I'm completing my first term. I'm the current vice chair. I'd say the two proudest things of my service so far are the town plan process and my service on the child care committee. I'd say both of those areas let me ask lots of questions to people who knew more than me, and let me learn so much, and then share it in a way that I hope could be helpful for the various processes. I think that's what's great about the Planning Commission is even if you have a subject matter expertise in one little pocket of what we do, there's just so much else to learn, and so much of the role is bringing other voices to the table in the areas where you're not the expert, and so that's what I've enjoyed so much. In my professional capacity, I do regulatory analysis and policy development for affordable housing. So just like Ernie, I'm really excited about the land use and zoning work we're doing now, and the process is really cooking thanks to Jackie's leadership and Rod's management of the process. It's exactly what my little pocket of expertise is suited for here, and that's understanding how the rules on paper turn into incentives for development. And so I'm looking forward to continuing that process, understanding how the rules that we write can shape the future of the town in a way that supports sustainability and access and affordability. So I'd be honored to continue on the Planning Commission. Thanks for giving me the opportunity tonight. Thanks, Roger.
Thanks so much, Brian. All right, so now I'm going to try to get Vince Crow as recorded on his iPhone up for us. So let me just get that. Okay, there he is. Let me share my screen. Okay. I think you'll see that I watch YouTube for a lot of acceptance speeches because they make me feel better. So you'll be seeing that as I share my screen, the algorithms. All right, so here's YouTube. Here is Vince Crow.
Hi, my name is Vincent Crow, and I am applying for a seat on the Planning Commission. First off, I want to thank Roger for helping facilitate this delayed video call. Unfortunately, my schedule didn't work out with being there tonight, so I'm glad that we were able to make something work. So first off, a little bit about myself. We moved to Norwich about 5 years ago. I have 2 young kids. Both of them go to Marion Cross, and I worked as a mechanical engineer till about the time that we moved to town. At that time, I was a stay-at-home parent. And then now I am a substitute teacher at Marion Cross. I first started getting involved with some issues of the town by being part of a group of residents who support the Beaver Meadow sidewalk, and kind of got a glimpse into the inner workings of the town and just everything that could be kind of involved in that. And I'm eager to help out solve some of the issues moving forward with town while still keeping its history and other aspects in mind that were the reason that I decided to move to town in the first place. Thank you for your time and hope to meet you in person soon. Thanks. Bye.
Okay. I think that worked. Yeah. All right. Cool. Okay, so
Welcome one and all to the Late Show.
Hold
I'm your
on.
host, Stephen Colbert.
YouTube's still going. Okay. So Stephen Colbert was talking about Vladimir Putin. Okay, but now we're back. All right. So so we heard from our 4 candidates for 4 seats. And do anyone have any questions for these guys. Go ahead, Marcia. I think you're in.
I have a general question for everybody. Is planning synonymous with development?
Okay, who would like to answer that? Go ahead, Ernie.
Is he muted?
You're a mute. Oh my gosh, 3 years in, folks. Come on, you're unmute yourselves.
The answer in my mind is no. It has to be considered. I mean, it's part of it, but so is keeping in mind, and it's right in the Vermont statutes, things like, keeping the forest blocks, as whole as possible, considering which, and in part that's even specified as being part of a climate change combating issue. There are the demographic issues. There's making how the town is going to feel to people, and a lot. Planning is got to do it with, I think, how you live. It's got to do with not just the natural environment, but the human environment, the social environment. It pulls together just about every, I don't know, social and scientific discipline there is, really, to do it right.
Okay, thanks so much, Ernie. Brian, would you like to answer that?
Sure. Thanks for the question, Marcia. I think it's a good one. If you take a look at the town plan, one thing really stands out, and that's that it's not that planning is synonymous with development. It's that development is happening whether planning is happening or not. And over the last few decades, the town has become more unequal. Most development has happened in Ernie's forest blocks, farther away from town. There has been development, but it's not been conscious, sustainable, strategic. So when we think of planning and the work that we're doing on the Planning Commission, it's using our shared values to shape that development at the scale that makes sense for the community. It's not in favor of or against development. It's about bringing our values to the development that's occurring.
Okay, lovely. Mark, if you would like to, you can answer this question.
Sure. Thanks, Ryder. Thanks, Marcia. I don't think planning is the same word as development. I also think that if you don't have a plan, you get what you get and you don't get upset, which I tell my daughter quite a bit. So I think that to some extent, you've got to have a plan and you've got to know what you want to do, and development can fit in that plan. I think around the world, population's increasing. We know there's growth. Without a plan, I would say we're in trouble, and that goes not just for our board, but for energy and for everything else that we've heard from today.
Okay, that's great. In the interest of time, I would really like to move us along. And so we have two motions for this committee, right? So we have one motion that would be a 1-year seat ending next year, and then 3 seats for the term that is defined on the motion sheet. So I'm happy to take motions. Go ahead, Mary.
I move to appoint Mark Aquila to a term on the Planning Commission to expire April 30th, 2023.
Okay, is there a second? Okay, second. Made by Mary, seconded by Rob. Any further discussion? Thanks for helping us out with this decision, Mark. All in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, thank you, lovely.
And the second motion, I move to appoint Vince Crowe, Ernie Cicatelli, and Brian Loeb to the Planning Commission for terms to expire on April 30th, 2026.
Is there a second? Okay, made by Mary, seconded by Claudette. Any further discussion? Go ahead, Marcia.
I liked those explanations, and I hope you keep to them.
Yes, and thank you. There's a lot of work to do. Like there, if you've watched a recent meeting, you know that folks are really sort of digging into the zoning rewrites. So thank you for your service at this unique time, right? So all in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, thank you. All right.
Thank you.
Thanks. And so we have two more committees.
Thank you, everyone.
So let's go ahead, Marcia.
Yeah, I wanted to thank you, Roger, for arranging the Vincent Crowe presentation, because I think it's really important that everybody is here for talking about why they want to be in a committee. So thank you for doing that.
Yes, and thanks to the folks who are parents who have made time to be here and it, as well. So I know it's school vacation week. So is Rec Council next in the interest of getting a
Yes.
parent out of here? Okay.
Yeah, Rec Council, Marisa Lorenzo.
Okay. Hi.
Thanks so much for having me, and it's really wonderful to see so many community members and neighbors sort of volunteer to do things. So it's exciting to be a part of. So we moved to Norwich about 4 years ago. I have 2 kids. We live on Craig Hill Road, and sort of as part of getting to know the community, we've been involved in a lot of the rec programming, both for kids and adults, and really sort of value the sense of community that those programs bring, sort of through, Halloween and sports and things like that. So really love the fact that it runs the gamut. And so I'd love to get back by sitting on the Rec Council committee and sort of furthering that sense of community.
That's great. Thanks so much, Marissa. Any questions or comments? Go ahead, Marcia.
Good to see you volunteering, Marissa.
I'm sorry. Oh, thanks.
I'm very glad to see you volunteering.
Thanks.
That's right. Yeah. Okay. So right, and so obviously, we know Marissa a little bit from her work on the screening committee. So we're really glad to see you again to help and serve your town. Okay, so I'll just call the question. Or can I take a motion rather? Make a motion. Yeah. Yes. Everyone's so helpful. Yes, take a motion, please.
I move to appoint Marisa Lorenzo to the Recreation Council for a term to expire on March 31st, 2025.
Okay, is there a second? Okay, made by Mary, seconded by Marcia. Now I'll say all in favor, please raise your hand. All right, thanks so much. Thanks for making the time.
Okay, so now we're on to Tree Warden, Thad Goodwin.
Okay, I will take the motion. I don't see Tad here, but I will say that he's been our tree warding for several years now. So I will say that I don't see him here.
Right.
But there was an application in the packet, so it's up to the board if we would like to entertain a motion.
Well, I'd like to make a motion, so.
Okay.
I'll just go ahead. I move to appoint Thad Goodwin as tree warden for a term to expire on March 31st, 2023.
Okay, is there a second? Okay, made by Mary, seconded by Claudette. Any further discussion? Go ahead, Mary.
I think Thad has been a very effective tree warden, and I'm happy that he has stepped up again.
Yes, thank you, Mary. I'm happy to call the question. All in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, lovely, thank you. And thank you, Thad. Now are we on the TROC?
Yes, we are.
Okay. And I think, yeah.
Okay. 1 seat plus alternate, Jeff Lubell and Jacqueline Allen as alternate.
And then this is the final committee, is that right? I think so.
I don't know.
I think it is. Everyone's nodding.
Final
Okay.
appointment, yes, it is.
Yes. Okay. So this is a representative to our Regional Planning Commission. Jeff Lubell was the alternate. Rod was sort of the designee. It makes good sense that we have a new appointee, and we're so glad that Jeff Lubell has stepped up. So can you please just introduce yourself, Jeff, and tell us a little bit more about the work that you've been doing as alternate and what you'll continue. And of course, thank you for your years on the Planning Commission.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm Jeff Lubell. I live on Spring Pond Road. I am cycling off of the Planning Commission. And I have for the last 3 years been an alternate to the TRORC backing up Rod. That has largely been a backup role. I've attended when he's not available. And now that I'm no longer on the Planning Commission, I'm would be interested in serving as the full-time representative. My daytime job, I'm the director of housing and community initiatives for a mission-driven research and consulting firm. So I do a lot of work on housing and community development policy. And so I know something about this topic and something about the role that regional planning plays in really trying to, ensure that the needs of all of the municipalities and all the citizens are met. I was engaged to some extent in the Keys to the Valley initiative. That was a regional initiative, and I've been in ongoing conversations with them about how they can kind of focus their recommendations and really try to be impactful. And would be happy to continue to be of assistance to the Regional Planning Commission in that regard. And I'm really just interested. There's going to be a lot of resources flowing through from the federal government to the state, and TROC is going to play a really important role. You see Sarah here helping us understand and translate, that state money down to the, locality. And I think I can play an important role in really gathering information there and bringing it back to share initially with the Planning Commission and with others about those resources and how we could really tap into them to benefit our town.
That's great. Thanks so much, Jeff. And then Jackie is here for the alternate. So when, Jeff indicates that, he is not available, would be her role. So Jackie, do you want to just speak a little bit to that?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. I think I'm in Jackie Allen, Union Village Road. I think I've been in town 8 years, and I've been on the Planning Commission now for, this is my 6th year. And I think Jeff is in a great position to take over as our Two Rivers representative. And I just want to support him as needed. And so that is my intent. I like to stay apprised of the Two Rivers work. And I think this will, help me increase my engagement. So as I say, I'm excited to support Jeff is where I'm at.
That's great. Okay, any questions for Jeff, really, and then also Jackie? Go ahead, Marcia.
Yeah, I think that we really haven't heard much, in terms of reports in the past. And I think that it would be good to have a regular report about what's going on at TRORC.
Cool. Jeff, do you think we can regularly hear, maybe through the mechanisms of the Planning Commission? I know that they do some reporting of their subcommittees and what have you. Perhaps you can make, we don't control that agenda, but perhaps that would be a good place for it.
Can I just say that it's my, I have been and I will continue to provide a report after each meeting. And really it's the discretion of the Planning Commission how they want to share that report, but I doubt it's top secret information that will be difficult for them to share with you. But I can't speak for the Planning Commission, but certainly I would have no problem with that being shared more broadly.
Yeah.
The meeting minutes are online, and it also indicates attendance, and indeed Jeff has attended. Go ahead, Marcia, follow up.
Yeah, I just never like to be sort of, second copy. I'd like to have a copy sent to the board. We appoint you, and I think it would be good for us to know directly what you're learning and bring it back to us, as well as to the Planning Commission.
That's fine with me. Should I send it to Roger?
Or Miranda?
we're happy to, I think a great mechanism is to get any kind of reporter update and put it into our correspondence. I think if the Planning Commission decides to put that as part of their committee updates, that would be another great way to, get it back to us that way as well.
Yeah.
But I know that you have also done some reporting.
Yeah. Just to clarify, Roger, this is Jackie. We do include that in our updates, reporting on Two Rivers. So we do that routinely. Yep.
Yep.
Just let me know. It's easy enough to copy whoever would like to be copied on that report.
Okay. Are we good? Okay. Great. So I'm happy to take a motion.
Okay, I move to appoint Jeff Lubell as representative and Jacqueline Allen as alternate representative to the Two Rivers Ottaquechee Regional Commission for terms to expire on April 30th, 2023.
Okay. Is there a second? Hold on. Is there a second? Okay, made by Mary, seconded by Claudette. Okay, Jeff, did you have a follow-up for discussion?
I just have a question as to why this is a one-year appointment as opposed to most of the other appointments that you're making that are for multi-year terms. It's really a question. I'll do it for 1 year or 2 years. It just means more times coming to these meetings to be reappointed. So I'm just curious what the rationale is, if there is one.
You.
I don't necessarily, I don't have an answer, but I think it's a good rhetorical question that we could answer in the future. How's that? I don't have an answer. I'll check.
Yeah.
Jackie, do you have an answer?
Yeah. I'm wondering, is it a Two Rivers practice? Because we've done it this way for a long time, and maybe Sarah could answer that question. I'm not sure if other towns are also a one-year appointment.
So Rod's here. He'll answer that, and then we're gonna finish the motion on the table, and then we're gonna move on because we're over, right? Go ahead, Rod. Hi.
Hi. Sarah can confirm for me, but I understand it's a Two Rivers thing. It's an annual appointment process that they conduct, and they update the list of appointed people in each town at the same time. So.
That doesn't necessarily mean that for when we have a reappointment, if we necessarily need to hear from our reappointments every year, right? There's different mechanisms that we can make our appointments to that board, right? So I'll say that, right?
Yeah, you could do it that way. You could just inform them that it's the same person.
Yeah.
And have your own appointment schedule.
Yeah.
Do that.
Yeah. There's a challenge for us. All right. So okay. So that's not helpful, but a broad answer.
Sorry, Jeff.
Yeah. Okay, so there's a motion on the table. Can we vote on it? All in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, thank you. Thank you both of you for being here.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay. All right, so our blessed regional planner from Two Rivers has had great forbearance here. So welcome, Sarah. I'm gonna thank you for being here so late at night. I know that you've been probably doing a lot of work within your squeeze compressed day job. And so thank you for being here at 7:54. I'm gonna have Rod introduce why we've asked you here and what are the sort of the goals of our broad conversation. So Rod, can you do that for us?
Hello, Sarah. Thanks for coming. And so board members and others, the purpose of having Sarah come tonight is to give an overview of the current state of play with ARPA and to discuss the best approaches that towns across the region have used to do two things. One is to identify priorities for expending ARPA funds, and the other is to find the best way to engage the community in that decision-making process. And then lastly, but related to both those items, is finding ways to make sure that if there are matching funds available from the state programs, that the decisions that we make maximize our ability to access other funds. Was that scratchy then? Was there something really weird with the audio?
Your audio is, I think perhaps if you turn your volume down, we get less reverb, but you know, I know that it happens with my computer too, but nonetheless, we can turn it
How's
over to
that?
Sarah. It's better, but we'll work on it.
Yeah, sorry about that. I've got issues.
It's all right. Mine. So, hi, Sarah.
Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me this evening. My name is Sarah Raitt. I work as a regional planner with Two Rivers Ottauquechee Regional Commission. And I'd like to just start off with a brief presentation to give you all some grounding, common grounding in where we stand with Treasury's latest regulations with respect to ARPA. So if it's okay, I'd like to go ahead and share my screen. Roger, would that be okay? Thank you. Okay, can you all see that now? There should be a slide deck there.
Yes.
Beautiful. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead into presentation mode here. So again, thank you all. Let's start off with just some brief comments on timeline, which many of you I think are already familiar with. ARPA monies are coming to local communities, that is towns and villages, in 2 equal tranches. The first tranche you should have received in August and September of last year of 2021. So you received 50% of your award, and the second 50% of your award is coming in August and September of this year. And Norwich's total allocation, as you may be aware, is just over $1 million, at about $1,019,000 that you're looking at. Some additional thoughts to keep in mind with regard to timing. ARPA dollars can be used to cover expenses that have been incurred since March 3rd of 2021. You must obligate all of your funds by the end of calendar year 2024, and you must expend all of your funds by the end of calendar year 2026. Any funds which are not spent by the end of 2026 must be returned to Treasury. So let's talk through the broad categories of what US Treasury says that local communities are allowed to spend these ARPA dollars on. And there are really sort of 4 broad umbrellas of eligible use categories. And any of you who are familiar with Treasury's final rule for ARPA know that it's a massive document. It's incredibly complicated. And even if you look at the compliance and reporting guidance, you'll see that there are some, I think, over 80 eligibility categories. So it can get very dense. And I do have good news this evening, which is that we can really minimize that confusion and minimize that complexity thanks to a change that was made in the final rule by US Treasury back in January when they published the final rule on January 6th. But just so you're aware, there are 4 broad categories of eligible uses. That is lost revenue, which is provision of government services, pandemic response, so responding to the economic and public health impacts of the pandemic, premium pay to essential workers, and then water, sewer, and broadband infrastructure, of which we've heard quite a lot in the news. Now, thankfully, because of the changes that happened on January 6th, when they published the final rule, for communities that have received small awards, and Norwich is one of those, every single town in our region is one of those, they have at their disposal the ability to focus exclusively on the lost revenue category. And this is really the recommendation of the Vermont League of Cities and Towns, and also of Two Rivers, that every community in our region really maximize their flexibility in spending their funding and minimize their administrative burden by focusing in on that lost revenue category. So I want to dive into that just a little bit more so that we can understand what that lost revenue category is. It's also called revenue replacement. Again, it's the easiest and most flexible approach to using your local ARPA dollars. Basically, what Treasury said is they decided that they were going to come up with a standard allowance of $10 million that is considered revenue loss due to the COVID pandemic. Basically, Treasury said, okay, we're going to assume that every community, regardless of the size of the community, regardless of the population of the community, regardless of the actual impacts of COVID on that community, we're going to assume that every single community, town, village, city in America lost $10 million as a result of the COVID pandemic. And the reason why they created the standard allowance is if you were following the ARPA discussions before January 6th, when they issued the final rule, they had originally asked communities to use a very, very complicated formula to come up with an actual calculation of how much they had lost as a result of COVID, which was creating so many headaches and really was not worth the administrative burden that was going into it. So Treasury said, all right, that's fine. We're going to say that there's a standard allowance. Every community can claim $10 million. Now, if you have an award that is less than $10 million, which obviously is the case for Norwich, that means you can claim the entirety of your award as revenue replacement dollars. And by doing so, you can use those funds for any service that's traditionally provided by a government, excluding the restricted uses in ARPA, which I'm going to cover in just a moment. But basically, that is going to really maximize your flexibility in being able to use those funds. If you decide to allocate the entirety of your award towards revenue replacement, you are not closing off any doors whatsoever. You're just maximizing your ability to use those dollars in a flexible way. And you are not limited. When it talks about services traditionally provided by a government, you're not limited to the services that the town of Norwich has provided in past years or even during the pandemic. It's really interpreted so broadly that it's any type of service provided by a state, a county, a city, a town, anywhere in America at any point in time. So you can see how incredibly broad this is. It can include direct assistance payments to businesses, to individuals. It can include any of the projects that are eligible under any of the other categories that we talked about in ARPA, the premium pay, the water, sewer, broadband infrastructure. All of those other projects can be covered under the revenue replacement. And the benefit there is that the reporting requirements under revenue replacement are vastly reduced compared to those other categories in other eligible use categories in ARPA. The other thing to consider about reporting is, the other thing to consider about the other eligible use categories is that those other categories in the final rule often have certain eligibility limitations that you're not going to experience under revenue replacement. So for example, if you would wanted to give a grant to a business in the community that was really struggling as a result of COVID, if you wanted to do that award under the economic impacts section of ARPA, you would have to meet certain burdens of proof to show that that business was meeting eligibility criteria as Treasury defined them. But under the revenue replacement category, you do not have to follow Treasury's guidance in terms of who gets a grant and who doesn't get a grant. All of those sort of eligibility and benefits criteria fall away. And again, you have the maximum amount of flexibility to use your funds, your dollars under the revenue replacement category. So you can see the advantage there. You can also include administrative expenses under the revenue replacement category. So that means the town staff time that is incurred as you are actually administering this award and making projects happen. You can hire a consultant even to help you to help administer this award. You can pay for legal expenses if you need to consult a lawyer in making sure that you're using your funds appropriately. So again, you can put those administrative expenses under the revenue replacement category. There is one strategy that I want to bring up to share with you all, and we've been trying to slowly spread the word about it to towns in our region. And this may be appropriate for some towns, and it may be appropriate, it may not be appropriate for other towns. It really depends on sort of where you're at and what makes sense for your community and the kinds of projects that you're contemplating. But I wanted to share this with you because VLCT has blessed it as a legally appropriate strategy and a fiscally appropriate strategy if you choose to take it. Because revenue replacement dollars can be used for the provision of any government service, one thing that you can, one approach you can take to using your ARPA funds is to pay off the non-contract portions of your current operating budget. So that's salaries and benefits for town staff, which would then free up funds within your general fund. And those freed up funds lose their federal character entirely. They are no longer bound by any of the ARPA regulations. They are not bound by the ARPA timeline. So you can see how that really does even further your flexibility if you were to follow that strategy. The other benefit to this strategy of paying off the non-contract portions of your current operating budget is that it allows you to sidestep the federal procurement regulations, which you would otherwise be held to. If you wanted to, for example, do an infrastructure project using your ARPA dollars, you would have to make sure that you're following uniform guidance in terms of how you bid that project out and how you actually execute the procurement process. So this is a strategy for folks to consider as a way of further increasing the flexibility that you have to use your dollars. So let's talk about what the no's are, because there's a short list and they're very clear as to what you cannot spend your ARPA dollars on. The first of those is that you cannot make extraordinary contributions to a pension fund in order to reduce accrued liabilities. So anything above and beyond what you normally be paying as part of a regular paycheck, that is not an acceptable use of ARPA dollars. You're not allowed to use your ARPA dollars to replenish a rainy day fund or hold it in financial reserve funds. And that's something that is important to keep in mind. I think some folks have sort of lost track of that in their conversations about ARPA at the local level. And folks think, oh, well, what if we were to have like an emergency contingency fund for, future pandemic outbreaks? Could we put the ARPA dollars in there? That's not acceptable. So again, stay away from any sort of squirreling away of money in reserve funds. You are not allowed to use ARPA dollars to service debt of any kind, regardless of when that debt was incurred. So you cannot use it to pay back old loans. You can't use it to initiate a new loan. Be very, very cognizant of that. Also, Treasury makes it clear that ARPA dollars should not be used to undertake projects that contravene CDC guidance with regard to COVID-19. So the commonly cited example is you shouldn't, for example, be building a jail using ARPA dollars, because that is bringing a large number of people into a small area and furthering the spread of COVID. So those kinds of projects, and then also projects need to comply with all the regulations that are referenced in your award documentation. Remember that when you certified your award for your award, you signed two documents. You signed the award terms and conditions document, and you also signed an assurances of compliance with civil rights law documents. So you have to make sure that you are compliant with those two documents in particular, and then all other applicable federal, state, and local laws. I do want to make a quick note here on reporting, because we are coming up on the first due date. You have an obligation to U.S. Treasury to make an annual report on your progress in using these funds. The first report is going to cover the period of March 2021 through March 2022. It's due April 30th. You have to make that report even if you have not spent any funding yet. And that report is going to be critical, because that is the report in which you will decide whether your town is going to take the standard allowance. The other option that Treasury gives you is to use that complicated formula and come up with a calculation of what you actually lost, which honestly, for almost every single town, I'm sure in our region, that's not going to be to your benefit, and it's not worth the energy or time. But if you do not declare that you're going to use the standard allowance in this first annual report, you lose that opportunity. So again, important deadline, make sure that you're aware of that. The reporting process is initiated by the designated authorized representative for your community, and they've been receiving communications, so they should be aware of what is being asked of them. Once they're in the Treasury's portal, they can assign reporting roles to other people if that makes more sense. But again, we're just trying to get the message out to folks to get started as soon as possible, because that reporting deadline is coming up, and I can't tell you how many phone calls I've had in the past couple of weeks alone, just from folks who are hitting hurdles just trying to get into the Treasury's portal. Any of you who are familiar with federal work know that federal websites are hard to navigate, and this is certainly no exception. So with that, I am going to go ahead and end my show and stop sharing here. And I know that Rod had brought up some questions about using ARPA dollars as federal match, or match to other grant programs. And then there's also some discussion about, local decisions around projects. I will say a few words about using ARPA dollars as match to other programs. VLCT has done a really great job of rounding up a list of state funding opportunities and other federal funding opportunities that are slowly being stood up. Some of them are actually funded through the state's ARPA allocation because they got their own pot of money. Some are funded through other programs. There are still bills that are trickling through the state legislature that may be, dropping more money into the laps of municipalities coming up soon. For example, Bill 518 is currently in the Senate, and that would give grants to municipalities to do energy conservation, efficiency, and fuel switching projects within municipally owned buildings. So that is huge. That's been a use that many communities have been considering using their local ARPA dollars to fund. And now there's this opportunity to potentially get an alternative funding source through the state to cover those projects. So it's worth keeping your ear to the ground and being aware of those other opportunities. Also recognizing that many of the funding opportunities that do exist or will exist right now are still not, they're still nascent. They're not yet fully formed. The programs haven't been stood up. Obviously, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, which is coming through the federal pipeline, has not yet been stood up yet. We don't have those pipelines in place to actually get funding on the ground. So VLCT has sort of been in this difficult position where they've been encouraging towns to wait and be patient and be aware of these other funding opportunities that are coming through. And so that's really a judgment call that the town has to make as you're sorting through your various competing needs and demands on your funding. If you choose to use your ARPA dollars to match other grant programs that you are trying to take advantage of, be aware that there is sort of it's really sort of hit and miss in terms of what agencies will accept ARPA dollars, local ARPA dollars as a match for their programs. Treasury had initially intended that that local ARPA dollar funds could be used broadly as a match for any federal program, but that has been whittled away as things do as they move through the federal pipeline. And so really right now we're in this position where some agencies have requested waivers where they've rejected local communities' ability to use their local ARPA dollars as match. So right now, the best message that I can give you about using ARPA dollars as match is that you need to talk to every funder that you're considering working with and ask them specifically, can we use our local ARPA dollars as match for your program? And then they will make that determination and let you know. If you have a project that has a big capital stack with multiple funders, you need to have that conversation with all of the funders if the match is sort of being distributed amongst them. So be aware of that. And at that point, I'm going to pause and I'm happy to take any questions and help talk through any concerns or questions about the regulations.
It's really great, Sarah. Thanks so much. I have one sort of broad question before I open it up. How to board member questions. So how, in your experience working with communities, are towns and municipal managers dealing with sort of the reality of, this fund going to known or existing projects, right, that may have been deferred or delayed, and that this is an important windfall? How do communities balance that with sort of the more popular narrative of this being a once in a generation sort of opportunity for funding, and that it should be put towards, a community vision or a community project or community goal? So can you talk about how people are sort of how boards and what the conversations are between sort of knowing what projects are baked from your capital planning, but then also knowing that there's a real public engagement process and how they're meeting those needs? That's a large question, but I think you get it.
Yeah, and it's really a question that the answer is going to vary from town to town. And we've seen a great diversity of approaches to ARPA across the region. From a regulatory standpoint, ARPA strongly encourages that there be some sort of public process informing decisions about the use of these ARPA dollars, but there are no prescriptions for exactly what that process should look like. And so, there are towns that are really taking this sort of from the perspective that they have already identified through their capital budget planning process specific infrastructure projects. They've already had a public deliberation process through that capital budget planning work that they've done, and they've determined that those are community priorities, and this is a expedient pot of money that can be used to further those projects. And so they're really just focusing their money on those pre-identified projects. There are communities that have sort of started at the drawing board and done a community input session where they've asked folks to come forward and share any and all ideas for how these dollars could be used. And then they are taking that broad universe of ideas and they're whittling it down based on evaluation criteria that have been sort of discussed and communally approved by the folks who are participating in those meetings, in those community conversations. So there's many different ways of approaching how you sort of make the decision of, okay, do we spend money on established projects? What about these nascent projects that have been sort of percolating in communities' minds and maybe they haven't been brought forward yet, but now is a really great time to do that. The narrative that this is a once in a lifetime funding stream is somewhat true and it's somewhat not, right? Because these kinds of projects are not only able to be funded through ARPA in most cases, right? There are other existing grant programs out there. We know that there's more federal money that's coming down the pipe through IIJA, and that's going to cover a lot of infrastructure needs. So like, I would be nervous to cling too tightly to that narrative, because I think that there are many different ways to climb a mountain, right? There are many paths up a mountain. And so trying to just build that hope in the community that, you know, you have the know-how, you have the resources and the excellent town staff to help you go after additional funding opportunities above and beyond your ARPA dollars. So it can be very hard, I think, for communities when there are so many different competing interests at the table and they're all sort of vying for the same pot of money. And I think trying to broaden people's vision and help people understand that this isn't the end all and be all, that there are more opportunities and the community will be supported in seeking those other funding opportunities is an important part of the conversation. Does that help at all?
That's really great. Thanks so much. Yes. Do board members have sort of any questions for Sarah? Go ahead, Mary.
Hi, Sarah. Thanks for this presentation. It's really helpful. I was wondering if there's any rule of thumb, if, for instance, we hired a consultant to administer our ARPA award, just for the scale of what they should be compensated, you know, what kind of time, or, you know, could it be thought of as a percentage, or what's reasonable, and how, you know, I wouldn't want to overdo it or underdo it, if that makes sense.
It's a really great question, Mary. And all I can really speak to is the regulatory language around that. And surprisingly, I think for many of us who are familiar with the federal grant landscape, this is something of a shocker. There is no prescription on the allowable percentage of direct administrative costs for this program. So that really opens the door to the consultant sort of setting their own proposal forward for you know, how much money it would require to do what's being asked of them. In terms of indirect costs, the word from Treasury is, if you have an approved indirect cost rate, then you are required to use that rate. Otherwise, use the de minimis 10% indirect cost rate, which is sort of the standard for federal programs across the board. But in terms of direct costs, which is what you're talking about for hiring a consultant, there is no set percentage. So in terms of what's reasonable, I think it's really important to look at what you're asking them to do and make sure that you're getting multiple bids so that you can compare different consultants' proposals. Does that help?
Sort of. I mean, would it vary according to the type of project or use of funds that you had to track? In other words, a very complicated project would have more reporting requirements, and so it would require more time, something like that.
I would say that that's true. The reporting requirements for ARPA are going to be minimal, thankfully, if you choose to allocate the entirety of your award under the revenue replacement category. Honestly, your reporting requirements are going to be incredibly streamlined. All you're going to have to say is X amount of money for this project and use maybe like a couple sentences to describe that project. It's incredibly easy from a federal perspective, like that almost never happens. So again, that's another reason to use that category. But if you are doing, for example, a complicated infrastructure project that involves permitting, state interfacing, that is probably going to involve more consultant costs because you're going to need somebody with the expertise to navigate you deftly through those various processes. And it would really be the reporting and the paperwork that happens outside of ARPA that they would be
Outside of
charging
ARPA.
for.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Absolutely.
I want to do about 10 more minutes of this, but just as an FYI. But Claudette, I think I saw your hand. No? Did I make that up?
You didn't see my hand, but I do have a question.
Okay, go for it.
Sarah, can you explain again I think you mentioned taking out non-contract wages? And
sure.
Run that by me again, please.
Sure. So basically, it's something you can think of it sort of as a short circuit approach to using your ARPA dollars. And you're basically swapping money out of your general fund. So the idea is, if you were to take, let's take an example of, let's say that the town wanted to do an infrastructure project using its ARPA dollars. To do that infrastructure project, you would have to make sure, if you just wanted to spend, right now you have ARPA dollars sitting in a special revenue fund for the town. If you just wanted to use your dollars straight out of your special revenue fund, you would need to make sure that you are following all of the federal regulations in uniform guidance. So that is largely focused around procurement, like how many bids you're getting, is it going to be competitively procured? But there are other provisions of uniform guidance that you'd have to make sure that you're following. And generally, you just need to make sure that you are sticking by all of the rules in ARPA's books, including the timeline, right? So you need to make sure that your infrastructure project could get done on the timeline that is specified through the ARPA final rule. If, however, you were to take the shortcut approach, what you could do instead is you could use your ARPA dollars and you could pay off the salaries and benefits of town staff for example, the next 3 years, whatever makes sense within your budget. That will then free up those dollars that would have been just part of your general fund, right? Because now suddenly they've been covered by a different source. So you have this pot of freed up money, and that freed up money is no longer federal in nature. It is not subject to ARPA regulations. It's not subject to the ARPA timeline. And so you have vastly increased your flexibility in spending that money. And on top of that, because you used your ARPA dollars to pay off, when you took the ARPA dollars directly from your special revenue fund, you used it to pay off salaries and benefits. You don't have to worry about any sort of uniform guidance regulations impacting that payment, right? So it's a way of sidestepping federal procurement regulations because you're going to end up with a pot of freed up money that no longer has to follow those regulations. And it's just a way to sort of minimize the administrative burden even further for towns. Does that help?
And Sarah, that includes the timeline of 24 and 26?
So, right. So if you were to take the ARPA dollars and pay off salaries and benefits, that would mean that you would need to have spent all of the ARPA dollars by the end of calendar year 2026, December 31st, 2026. So you would have to make sure that you've covered general fund expenses up to that point, and that's when you stop. And then the money that gets freed up within your operating budget, that has no timeline. You could do projects with that through the next 10 years if you wanted to.
Great. Okay, thank you. Does that answers your question, Claudette? Yeah. Okay, go ahead, Marcia.
Thank you, Sarah, for the presentation. Before I forget it, can you share a copy of that deck with us?
Absolutely. I'll send it to Rod afterwards.
Okay. My question is, even though that approach with using the lost revenue approach for expenses, it helps us under federal law, I don't see how it helps us under state law, because that money was voted by people for a certain purpose. Now we've got money that is basically extra money that hasn't been voted. And so I'm thinking, that's a problem. And I'm wondering how other people have addressed that problem, because it seems to me you'd have to go back to the public and ask for direction.
That's a really great question. Thank you, Marcia. And I'm sorry I didn't touch on that earlier. So if you were to use your ARPA funds directly from your special revenue fund for a project, that decision-making authority lies solely with the select board. That is the legislative body that has been sort of imbued with the power by Treasury to make that decision. If you were to take that short circuit approach and create a surplus effectively within your general fund, yes, you are going to have to follow whatever your town's current procedures are with regard to how the disposition of surpluses. And so that may mean for your community going back to a town vote. VLCT has sort of been putting out the message that there is no state regulation that specifically mandates that there be a town vote on surpluses. I'm not a lawyer, I can't speak to that. What I can say confidently is that, you know, your town attorney will know what the proper procedure is, either just for your town or with regard to state statute. And so you're going to need to follow that, certainly, if you end up in this position where you are short circuiting and creating a surplus within your general fund.
Okay. And my third question is, if we needed to talk to you again, will you come back?
Absolutely. Yep. At any time. And I also forgot to mention too, that I'm available to help with sort of facilitating community dialogues. That's part of our mandate from the state too, is to assist communities. If you decide to have some sort of public discussion, public meeting, I'm happy to help with that.
And I think I want to just, that's a great transition to, I don't have to get the last word, but I think a good final question is, you know, the board and community have some level of awareness about a municipal building that could benefit from ARPA funds, not only through the mechanisms of capital planning, but through a very sort of public conversation around its renovation. So, but that being said, you know, there is, I think, a desire, attention, interest in, you know, also using perhaps a smaller pot, if you will, you know, for real community feedback. I'm not saying that's necessarily the mechanism that this board is thinking of. We haven't necessarily explicitly discussed it, but nonetheless, by way of sort of wrapping up, can you just talk a little bit about sort of how legislative bodies have worked in furtherance of this, right? Have they sort of created a set of criteria and developed an application process for formal proposals? Let's say if there was an interest in, you know, hearing or spending money from the community, are there committees? Have you, and then finally, what kind of information and facilitation sessions have you run to date? So basically, like, what are some of the public engagement options that you have seen?
Sure.
Would be a good question.
Sure. So
maybe
again, a pretty broad gamut, I think, across our region. Everything from I think there were some sort of communities that started off with some broad visioning sessions and sort of needs assessment, community conversations. And then they moved into more specific sort of project proposal community discussions. Some communities just started off with, okay, let's just have a meeting. We'll just talk about ARPA and let's have everybody bring whatever ideas they have to the table. Some communities have not had that sort of public outreach at all, and they're really just relying on their capital budget plan, and they'll have perhaps a public hearing as part of a select board meeting to confirm that. Some communities are thinking about just doing a written proposal process whereby community members are solicited to provide written project descriptions to either town staff or to a committee that then get evaluated according to criteria that have been collectively discussed and approved. In terms of ARPA committees, there are a number of them that are springing up in our region and certainly many around the state. VLCT has put together a helpful toolkit with some resolution language and then some other just sort of procedural guidance for creating an ARPA committee. And so I would encourage you to check out their website to see those resources if you're interested in that kind of a process. In terms of my own involvement so far, the community meetings that I've been asked to attend have really been focused around bringing people together for the express purpose of generating ideas for the use of ARPA funds, and then trying to winnow down those ideas a little bit more by more narrowly defining them and also evaluating them against evaluation criteria that we've discussed as a group and fleshed out together. So that's really been my role in helping folks in a public engagement setting. And then of course I'm always available by phone if folks have questions or want to have a conversation about, an ARPA committee formation process or something to that effect. But again, like it has been very diverse across our region and certainly across our state. And ultimately the decision-making power lies with the select board. So any sort of work that's done by the committee would be advisory only.
Okay. Okay, this is really great. I think this is an amazing and helpful first step in how to talk about ARPA, right? So thank you so much, Sarah, and for being here and for your forbearance and as we got through our committee appointments. Rod, what do you sort of see as sort of a next step with the ARPA discussion, and then we'll end this agenda item.
Thank you, Roger. Yes. Yes, thank you so much, Sarah. That was great. So I see, first of all, getting a hold of the presentation that Sarah put together, which is very useful, and circulating that to the board and making that available maybe on the town website as a backup. And then I think that the board needs to encounter this issue again as an agenda item, responding to what you've heard tonight. So I propose it at the next meeting or the following meeting after that, whereby you express preferences about the approach that you're going to prefer to take with regard to the first big one, which is that question of whether to proceed, assuming that we're going to use ARPA money to replace non-contract services in the general fund, and then free ourselves from the ongoing restrictions on the use of federal funds, or whether the projects and the kind of activity that the town envisages could be initiated and spent in the time frame that we have under the ARPA question. So it seems to me that the first big question, the first cut, if you like, is, can we do stuff by 2026 and pay for it? And if we're confident that we can, what are those kinds of things? And so given the current economic climate and the lack of availability of engineering support and a variety of other professional services, we might conclude that depending on the kinds of projects that we want to do, we might want to try and work the system so that we are not constrained by the 2026 deadline. But if we think we've got a range of smaller things that we can bid out, get done, and be finished with by 2026, then that's the other course to take. So I think that's the first cut. And then after that, to use the buckets analogy, one big bucket, I think, looking at the existing capital improvement plan and what kinds of projects we think that we want to undertake. We know historically that we've had a lot of discussion about energy retrofits for Tracy Hall and other public facilities. We know that there are things that we would like to proceed in that regard. If that's what fits the description for a good set of projects, then we should proceed in that path, acknowledging that we need to still build a public participation track to ensure that we continue to have buy-in from the community about what we're doing.
Great. Okay, thanks, Claudette, and then we'll move on, if that's okay.
Yeah, and I would also think, do we need to decide as a legislative body whether we take the standard allowance
Yes.
piece? which I think in order to get the report done by the end of April, that would seem to me to be a priority for our next meeting.
Yes, I agree.
I should say that I was assuming the obvious thing to do is to take to take it. I mean, if you wanted to, yeah.
I would too, but I think we as a body need to vote on that. And,
yes, you do. Yes, you do.
We'll come back. We'll come back.
So it should be at our next meeting for sure.
Yep.
Right, but that only gives us 3 days to make sure that the Treasury site works.
I know.
And we just so folks know, I believe we designated the previous town manager. So I think Rod is actively working on getting that changed so we can not get any cogs in the federal website wheel.
Yeah.
Okay. Go ahead, Sarah, please, and then yeah.
Just to note, Rod, if you have any trouble on that front, please reach out. I'm happy to help troubleshoot as best I can. And you can go ahead and take those steps of getting into the portal, which is really, I think, the heaviest lift before the select board needs to make an actual decision, just so that you can get all the logistical hurdles out of the way up front.
Thank you so much, Sarah.
Okay, Marcia, did you have a follow-up question? And then I really do want to move on, if it's okay.
Having struggled for years trying to get into federal portals, I'm thinking, deadline time comes and they're just clogged and you can't get in. So what's the fine? What's the hammer that comes down if we don't get in?
Sarah, do you have a sense? Just don't do it, right?
It has not been made explicit what the hammer is. I would strongly encourage you to not take that misstep. There's been frightening discussions about Treasury clawback of funding lately. So I think it's going to be important that everybody make sure that they've crossed all the T's and dotted all the I's.
Claudette, you truly get the final word, and then we're moving.
Yeah, and I would guess because the reporting deadlines have been out there for months, that there would be no slack.
Right. Okay, well, that's a good note as any to end on. With so much thanks to Sarah. This has been really helpful and wonderful. So thank you.
Thank you all. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Okay, all right, folks. So I'm going to try to get through the next 2 agenda items, and then I think we've earned a break before the town manager's report and before the CCI. So let's go to the next item on the agenda, which is an approval of some police department expenditure requests. I think it's appropriate to begin with a motion, if that's okay.
Okay, I'll move that. I move to approve the purchase of body armor replacements for the police department from the Safariland Group in the amount of $2,979, half of which cost will be reimbursed by a regular state of Vermont grant, resulting in a net cost of $1,489.89.
Okay, is there a second, Claudette?
Second, and just a question that this funding will be coming out of the police department special equipment fund. Okay.
Yes, thank you for that. Yes. Okay, so made by Mary, seconded by Claudette, who clarified the designated fund source. Any discussion? Go ahead, Marcia.
Question, the grant, is that fairly assured or is that a hope?
Rod, would you like to answer? My understanding is this is a perennially achieved grant, but I know that only from getting it before in my time. But go ahead.
Yes, my understanding is that it's sort of a standing offer grant, that we are eligible, that if we apply, we'll receive it, and that the terms of the grant are as explained in the email from Chief Keelan.
Any further questions? All right, so I'm happy to call the question. All in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, thank you. There's a second motion relating to this agenda item. Mary, would you like to make it?
Yes, I move to approve the expenditure of $2,985.76 for repairs to the 2013 Ford Police Interceptor sedan per the quote by Co-op Service Center.
Okay, is there a second? Made by Mary, seconded by Claudette. Oh, and also to clarify that this is coming from the cruiser fund, is that right? Yep. Okay. Any further discussion? Not seeing any. All in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, thank you. All right. I think that covers the police department expenditure agenda item. Is that right?
Yes, it does.
Okay, and so we'll just move on to the next one, which is the town clerk expenditure request for records digitization. Let's take a motion, and then I think we should hear a little bit of an explanation about this, because that would be helpful. Go ahead, Mary.
I move to approve the purchase of services from COT Systems for the scanning and indexing of the town clerk's land records and attachments in the amount of $26,058.
And that would be from the records restoration designated fund. Okay, yep. All right, is there a second? Seconded by Claudette. All right, Rod, could you, I know this is from our clerk. Can you contextualize this a little bit? Like, if you can.
Certainly. So COT Systems is one of our regular vendors in the town clerk space. And one of the things that they do is provide digitization of archived records. And so this is an ongoing project that the town clerk has argued successfully for in previous budgets. There's a reserve fund identified for this purpose. And this is the most recent phase proposed for digitizing a set of volumes in the land records. And so it would involve scanning and indexing those records from volumes 72 to 91 and attachments that go with it from 6 to 7. So I think the easiest way to explain this is that it's just an ongoing project of the town clerk to constantly try and digitize the existing records.
Okay, thanks so much. Any further discussion or questions? Go ahead,
Rod. Roger.
Oh, Bonnie's here. Oh, hi, Bonnie. I didn't know that you were here. Anything further that you would like to add?
This also will give us the flexibility to get the records online and open for people to go through them and purchase them through online rather than having to come in the office. Okay. So it allows me to have at least a 40-year search online for researchers and attorneys and real estate.
Okay, thank you so much, Bonnie. I didn't recognize your number. Marcia, do you have a question?
Yeah. Bonnie, I was kind of concerned because it says that there, under the disclaimers, there's no representations or warranties regarding images, their completeness or security. And so that brings up to my mind, three questions. One, they're not warranting that these things are going to be complete when they're finished. Security is always an issue as far as I'm concerned. And I'm wondering if it's because there's a 6-month time frame to accept the work, if that means that we would need additional help because presumably you have to do some proofing to make sure that it's working. And I guess the final question is, do we already have access for this set up, or is it done via the web so that we don't have to purchase something extra to facilitate people being able to access records this way?
Bonnie, do you?
No, you won't have to. You won't have to purchase anything extra, Marcia. It's already part of the COT system, which is also record room and resolution. So the reason I have hesitated in the past to put the documents online is because I couldn't do a 40-year search all at one time, and I was worried about people missing information and thinking they had done a complete title search.
Right.
And we have not had any issues really as far as proofing, they come into the office and they scan the documents right there in the office. So the books do not leave the building when they are being scanned. And as far as security, I think they're as secure as anything else could possibly be on the internet. I have not heard any reason or heard anything about security breaches with this system, and we've been on it now, I believe, since 2012. So we have had a 10-year relationship with them. I think that's the best that I can do to assure the security.
So no issues of records disappearing or not being complete when people find them?
No. They you know, if anything were to be tampered with, and they won't have the ability to do that. These are read-only documents that they'll have the ability to print off. Any foul play, so to speak, would have to be done right now from one or two computers, which are the clerk computer and Judy's computer. All the data is inputted through our computers, and everything is double proofed before we release those documents to the portal.
Okay. So I would like to move on, if that's okay, Marcia.
Yes, I just really want to ask this one question. Is there ever a time have you found where like a deed or a writ or anything was half there?
No, there isn't. And in the event that were to happen and it was brought to our attention, we could rescan and replace that document right from our office.
Great. Thank you.
Okay. This is great. So I'll call the question, if that's okay, unless we good. All right. So thank you, Bonnie, and thank you, Rod. So all in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, thank you, unanimous. All right. So folks, I'm gonna, it's 8:48. We have a town manager report, and then we also added to the agenda the approval of the CCI expenditure for some computer purchases. So I'm gonna give us a generous break and come back at 9. And then I would really like us to work through the town manager report and the CCI thing in 10 minutes, like truly, like 9:10, it's done. And then the remaining time for our session. So I'll see you at 9. Okay, we'll take a break. Okay, resuming the April 13th select board meeting at 9. Okay, so the next item on the agenda is, well, it's 2 agenda items. So the next item on the agenda is the CCI approval of the CCI expenditure for some computers and some related peripherals. So we had some information that was sent to us. There was an addendum to the packet. Rod, I don't know if you've come back to us, but do you anything that you would like to bring to our attention that's not self-evident in the documents? How's that? You could say no too.
Seem pretty complete.
Okay. All right. So he's saying no. Okay. So does anyone have any questions about the CCI proposal for the expenditure of computers? This is obviously a long time coming. Some of these computers are 10 years old. Go ahead, Claudette.
Yeah, Roger, you mentioned peripherals, and the motion just says desktops and laptops, but the peripherals weren't.
I think it was one peripheral. I think it might have been a cord. So sorry. It could be. Go ahead, Ron. Do you want to correct my mistake?
Try and keep this as brief and ungeeky as possible, Claudette. So because the computers we have are so old, the monitors are also 10 years old, and they don't make monitors and computers like that anymore. So to make a new computer, send a signal to an old monitor, you need a special adapter to go back in time. And so the peripherals that Roger mentioned are these special little adapters that allow you to plug in a brand new computer to a 10-year-old monitor. Until we get new monitors, which is also on the cards, but that's a different thing altogether. And we won't get those through CCI. We'll probably just go and get a, it's a personal preference thing, and people's office settings are different. Some people will want big screens and have room for them. Some people won't. So it's one of those things that takes a little bit of time of working through. And I'm not sure the staff are really even aware of, if you like, what the possibilities are.
Okay, Marcia, do you have a question?
Yeah, just very briefly, is everybody getting a new computer?
Yes.
Okay.
Everybody at a workstation is getting a new computer except for Ben Trussell, the building custodian, and he is getting the most recent existing computer, and he has a very light set of demands, being able to surf the web, do email, and check his calendar. And so the expectation is that because that's the only functions he uses, he should be able to get away with the least ancient existing computer.
Yes, and we're vulnerable on Windows 7, so geez.
Yep.
All right, go ahead, Marcia, follow up.
Yeah, so for somebody like, say, Bree, who's running around doing stuff, is there an option to do something like a laptop if she wanted?
All staff were asked as to what their preferences were. Those that expressed a preference for a laptop and could justify the additional expense in terms of their work are being supplied with a laptop. That includes Bree.
Great. All right, any further board discussion or questions? All right, I'll take public comment. Sherilyn, go ahead, Rob, please, go ahead.
Yeah, just quickly, those adopters, I mean, it's nitpicking, but it's worth mentioning that those adopters for the monitors, we buy them by the dozen for the high school. And that $27 cost is like twice what they cost on Amazon. Laptops and computers are in short supply in a lot of places. You can't shop around for those.
Right.
But it's a minor aspect, but
yes. Okay, yeah, understood. I'll take public comment. Go ahead, Cheryl. And as a suggestion that I made earlier, please consider phrasing your public comment as a comment.
I didn't understand what you said. Please what?
Please consider phrasing your public comment as a public comment, as a comment and a question. Yeah, but go ahead.
Well, since the listers are thrilled to, in the office in total are thrilled about this, I was just wanting to ask the question about the computers that are being purchased. There seems to be a slight difference. We haven't had a conversation with you, Rod, but we're just really excited because of the age of what we're working on. There's a slight difference between the two that are being purchased, and I was curious about that.
I'm not sure which two you're referring to. So there's a standard desktop model, which is the equivalent, and it's got equivalent power and capacity to the one of the two laptops that are being purchased. And so the lister's office is a static setting, and the sort of straight replacement for the machines. So yeah, that's the explanation there.
My sense of reading the line item, one says elite and one doesn't. That was sort of my differentiation.
You're referencing the ones that are being replaced, the ones that are there now. Not that they're all being replaced with the same Lenovo machine.
Okay, I didn't read everything. Sorry.
Yep, that's okay.
Okay, great. Yes, and as the report makes clear, some of these are 11 years old. So thank you, Rod, for, I know that you were, when you were a planner or director of planning, you were sort of sort of consulting or part of a team on this, and now you've led us to it. So thank you for that. All right, so please, I'm sorry for forbearance. Did we take the motion?
No, not yet.
Can you make a motion? Great, thank you.
So I move to approve the purchase of 6 desktop computers and 6 laptop computers for a total amount of $14,625 to be paid from the General Administration Reserve Fund.
Okay.
I'll
Is there a
second.
second? Okay, made by Claudette, seconded by Mary. Any further discussion? This is great. Okay, all in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, great. All right, we did it in 7 minutes. All right, yes, everyone's excited. That's wonderful. All right, so the next item on the agenda is we separated out the town manager report. Why don't we, I think it was as always, it was helpful and clear, rather than ask Rod to given the time to give us the highlights in words. Does anyone have any questions for Rod? Go ahead, Mary.
In our former meeting, we had been talking about visiting different departments, in order just to become more familiar with them. And I'm wondering whether I had kind of approached Rod about going in individually and touring DPW and maybe talking to Rec, but I'm wondering if it's still a good time. I was thinking of doing that soon, or would it be better if we just held off and tried to figure out how to do it as a group and warn it? Because that was one of our questions.
The only thing I'll say is I think we need to fit it in with a larger agenda setting for the year, right? We now have 12 meetings that are non-budget. And so I think we just need to look at it really intentionally and see where we're at. I started some of that work based on your earlier memos, but obviously it's getting deferred because we've had other things just sort of come up. So I don't know, that's where I see it. But if you want to hear from Rod on that, let me know. Is that helpful as an answer? Or
Sort
of. Okay. So my thinking is, I think we need to see if we have time and capacity for it amongst everything else that we want to
Okay,
do.
that makes more sense.
Okay, sorry. I'm not concise. Any other questions for Rod? I have one, Rod. I know that the reciprocal licensing agreement for the trail has it was initiated by our attorney to the school's SAU 70s attorney several months ago. And I know that at the most recent meeting, the school indicated that they are eager to seek finalization. Can you talk a little bit about how where we are with that and what you've heard back from council? Anything that you would like to say in terms of an update on that would be helpful.
Thank you. So yes, our council provided the council for this SAU 70 draft reciprocal license agreement in January, early January the 10th, and we prompted them for a response in the middle of March, and we understand that the supervisory union and the school board have worked with their council, and that is on their marked up version of the draft agreement is in progress. And as far as I'm aware, we have not received a copy of it. So I've definitely not received a copy of it. And as far as I know, Joe McLean, our council, has not received a copy of it. When we do, I'll let you know. I understand the school is eager to move forward with various things, but we feel that it's important that the agreement is at least in discussion before we proceed with anything.
Okay, and then finally, just because I want this on the record, quite frankly, we initiated a motion and that was unanimous in August of last year that sought that authorized you to begin to initiate a discussion on a reciprocal license agreement. And then how soon after did that work begin from our attorney? And then how soon after did their attorney first be sent it?
We worked with our attorney in the October through November timeframe, and then there was a break. There was the typical slowdown between, between Thanksgiving and Christmas. It was forwarded to their council January 10th.
Okay.
And I understand informally that there was an oversight on the part of their council, and it was not forwarded to the school for the supervisory union for consideration until early March.
Okay, great. Thanks so much. Any other questions on anything else? And then I violated my own rule. We're at 9:12. So let's go ahead, Marcia. You get the final question.
Okay, so this says it's a February 4th report. Is that a mistake?
That's a typo. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And have we advertised the position for zoning administrator? I had a question about whether that was appropriate, even though we've already done it and it's gone to the council. So I'm wondering if that really has been advertised yet. And I'd kind of like to hold off hiring somebody until we have the answer from council.
Rod, do you want to just share sort of the initial advice you got from if you got initial advice?
I have received initial advice. I expect to see a detailed response to Masha's memo from council soon. In fact, Joe and I discussed the timing of that today. The zoning administrator position is advertised in the Valley News, on the town webpage, and has been distributed to the typical listservs, and the job description and the position description, the advertisement makes clear that the select board appoints the planning commission makes a recommendation to the select board, and the select board appoints the zoning administrator, which is the way I was appointed as zoning administrator when I was appointed as zoning administrator for Norwich, and is my understanding of the statutory requirements. So that series of steps would be followed. The questions that Marsha was asking about the allocation of labor and responsibility for the management of the zoning administrative position specifically are things that are being addressed in the council's response.
Okay, that's great. Thanks so much, Rod, for your answering of our questions in your town manager report.
You're welcome. Thank you.
All right. So let's move on to our next agenda item, our final one, which is an executive session. And I believe there's one motion. And Mary, it looks like you're going to make it for us.
I move to enter executive session under 1 VSA section 313A3, evaluation of public officer or employee, to discuss a personnel issue and to include the town manager.
Okay, is there a second? Okay, made by Mary, seconded by Claudette. You have a question, you have a discussion or question, Marcia?
Just a friendly amendment. Rather than including the town manager at the beginning, could we just and to invite the town manager so that we can invite him in when we're ready?
I think it's well, why don't we all go in together, and then we could ask Rod to come in and out as needed, and the minutes will reflect these movements. How's that?
Timings. Yes.
Okay, so I'll say that in the discussion session. So I'll call the question. All in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, thank you. Thank you, CATV. CATV says we'll pause a second.
Second.
Made by Mary, seconded by Rob. All in favor, please raise your hand. Thank you. I believe we'll have a brief statement and a motion for action.
The Norwich Select Board takes seriously the concerns of all town employees, including the town manager, and is committed to ensuring a safe, healthy, and welcoming work environment for all employees. We, as a board, direct the chair and one other member of the Select Board to immediately identify and contract with an HR professional to investigate current HR complaints and to assist the town to build a positive work environment.
Okay, thank you, Marcia. There was a motion embedded in that statement. Is there a second to direct me and one other to seek HR consulting?
Yes, I'll second it.
Okay, made by Marcia, seconded by Mary. In the discussion, is there someone who would like to be named to support me in this work? Okay.
I would be happy to be the second person.
Okay, thank you very much, Claudette. With that said, all in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for reading that, Marcia. Okay, I believe our next motion is next agenda item is the adjournment.
I move to adjourn.
Okay, made by Mary. Seconded by Marcia. All in favor, please raise your hand. All right, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone.
See ya.
Good night. I'm waiting for the peepers and for the red-winged blackbirds.
Yep, the
Come to
robin.
my house, come to my house.
Just think of it, that you can have, 6 weeks of spring. You just travel around town. Right?
Thank you
Yeah,
all.
when I go down to the village, it's like, wow, the grass is green.
Yeah, but then we can come back up to your house if we miss the peepers later on.
Okay,
Peeper
good night.
Robin.
Good night to the peepers and all of you.
All right,
night.
all right, peeps.